All right, today we are jumping headfirst into the mind of one of the most brilliant and, let's be real, one of the most challenging thinkers of the entire Byzantine era, Maximus the Confessor. Together, we're going to crack open his masterwork, the Ambigua, and see if we can unravel some of the massive theological mysteries he was wrestling with.
And, when I say brilliant, I am not kidding around. The introduction to this very text calls him one of the most challenging and original Christian thinkers of all time. That's a pretty bold claim, right? But as you're about to see, he absolutely earned it by tackling ideas that can still tie our brains in knots today. So, what's our game plan? Well, I want you to think of this as a kind of theological detective story. First, we're going to meet the mastermind himself, Maximus. Then, we'll investigate 3 of his biggest cases: the mystery of the unmoved mover, the puzzle of the Father and Son, and the paradox of the God-man. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with our verdict on why this ancient way of thinking is still so important. Let's get into it. Okay, first things first, a mind forged in Byzantium. Before we get into the mysteries, we gotta get to know the man who tried to solve them. So Maximus pops up on the scene around 580 AD, born in the heart of the empire, Constantinople. He actually worked in the imperial court for a while before deciding that life wasn't for him and becoming a monk. It's in the 640s that he writes this masterpiece, the Ambigua, but his story ends tragically. He died in exile in 662 for sticking to his beliefs. I mean, this was a man from a completely different world, but his ideas, man, they had some serious staying power. And that name, the Ambigua, it literally means difficulties or ambiguities in Latin. You see, this wasn't just a book of him pondering things. No, this was a direct targeted mission. He was setting out to solve the absolute toughest, most confusing, most puzzling passages he could find in the works of the great thinkers who came before him. He wasn't a dreamer, he was a problem solver. Which brings us right to our first case file, the mystery of the unmoved mover. Now, this is a classic philosophical puzzle, a real head-scratcher that goes all the way back to thinkers like Aristotle. And here's the puzzle. Just think about it. If God is perfect, complete, and totally unchanging, how can he be the cause of everything that moves and changes in our universe without, being changed in the process? How can something that's unmoved also be a mover? Now, you could try to dig through Maximus's original text for the answer, and, well, good luck, because it's some seriously dense stuff. But, lucky for us, he doesn't just use complex logic. He actually hides the key to the whole thing in a simple, really clever analogy. He just slices right through this complicated philosophical knot with a comparison that, once you hear it, makes a surprising amount of sense. So here's the core idea. Maximus says to think of God as being like the scientific principle of an art. What does that mean? Well, think about the rules of geometry. The Pythagorean theorem, right? It's always the same. It is unmoved, it doesn't change, but it moves a student to learn, to build, to create a perfect right angle. The knowledge itself stays constant, but it causes a profound change in the person who learns it. For Maximus, that's kind of how God works. He moves the world not by giving it a push, but by being this perfect, unchanging reality that all of creation is naturally drawn towards. Okay, let's move on to our next case. And this one takes us right into the middle of a huge, fiery debate from Maximus's time about the relationship between God the Father and God the Son. Now, the main opposing view back then was a position called Arianism. And the Arians basically argued that the Son was a creation of the Father, that he was brought into existence by an act of the Father's will. And if you think that through, it means there must have been a moment, even a split second, when the Son didn't exist. So he couldn't be co-eternal with the Father. So you have these 2 completely different pictures. The Arians see a timeline. First, the Father has a will, and then later the Son is created. But Maximus just blows this whole timeline up by saying, you're forgetting something crucial. In God, there is no time. He argues there's no before and after. The Father begetting the Son isn't some event that happened in the past. It's an eternal reality that just is, right now and forever. And to help us get our heads around this, he once again uses these fantastic analogies. He asks, hey, can you have an intellect, a mind, without the word or the thought that it produces? Or can you have a light bulb that's on, but without the light it gives off? Of course not. They happen at the exact same time. So that's the crucial point. In the same way, you can't have the Father without the Son. They aren't one after the other. They are simultaneous, eternal. All right, let's move on to our third and final mystery, and honestly, this might be the biggest head-scratcher of them all, the paradox of the God-man. I mean, this question is at the very core of Christianity, right? How can a single person, Jesus Christ, be 100% God and at the same time 100% human? How do you hold two complete, distinct natures together in one being without it just becoming a huge contradiction? To unlock this mystery, we need this secret password. It's a Greek word, hypostasis, and it basically just means the underlying reality or personhood. So in this whole debate, hypostasis refers to the single, unified person of Christ. The big idea is that there's one person, one hypostasis, who just happens to have two complete natures, one divine and one human. So how does Maximus use this key to solve the puzzle? Well, he says everything depends on which lens you're looking through at any given moment. If you're talking about Christ as one unified person, the one hypostasis, then yeah, you can mix the attributes. You can say things like, God suffered on the cross, or the man from Nazareth created the universe. But the moment you switch your focus to his two separate natures, you have to keep their properties distinct. Divinity, by its very nature, can't suffer, and humanity, by its nature, can't create worlds. The big mistake, Maximus says, is when people get these two perspectives all mixed up. It's all about being logically precise.
So, what's the verdict? We've waded through some very old, very complex arguments. Why should any of us today care about this ancient logic? What's the point? Well, let's just quickly run through our case files one last time. For the unmoved mover, Maximus cracked the case with his analogy of the unmoved teacher. For the father and son debate, he completely dismantled the Arian timeline by arguing that divine acts are simultaneous, not one after the other. And for the God-man paradox, he gave us the key, the careful distinction between the one person and the two natures. 3 mysteries, 3 incredibly elegant, logical solutions. But here's the real takeaway. As we've seen, these weren't just abstract puzzles for monks to debate in a monastery somewhere. They represent something so much bigger. This profound attempt to use the tool of human reason to walk right up to the very edge of the infinite, to try and speak carefully and coherently about things that are ultimately way beyond our full understanding. And that really leaves us with one last massive thought. Maximus's work is an absolute masterclass in logical precision, but it also points to this even bigger question for all of us. If, in the end, our words and even our best logic will always fall short of truly describing ultimate reality, then how do we even begin to talk about the things that are, by definition, unspeakable? Now that is a mystery worth pondering.